Imagine being told over and over again that you'll never amount to anything, that you're too broken, too weak, and too far gone to even try. Most people would quietly accept that as their fate and live out that story in silence. But not David Goggins. He tore that script apart and wrote a new one, with sweat, blood, and an almost terrifying level of willpower. He transformed himself from an abused kid who once hid from the world into a Navy SEAL, an ultramarathon runner, a Guinness World Record holder, and someone who has redefined what toughness really means. Hey everyone, I'm Bix, and welcome back to Bix Book Summary. Today we're diving into Can't Hurt Me, Master Your Mind, and Defy the Odds by David Goggins. This isn't your average motivational read. It's raw, brutally honest, and often uncomfortable to face, but it will shake you awake and remind you of just how much untapped strength you already have. And remember, if you want to grab your own copy of the book, I've left a link in the description below. In this video, we'll walk step by step through Goggins' journey, from his childhood scarred by abuse, poverty, and racism, to the relentless grind of Navy SEAL training, to the moments where he pushed his body and mind past limits that most people couldn't even imagine. Along the way, you'll discover the tools he used to master himself, learning to callous the mind, embracing suffering as fuel, and transforming pain into power instead of running from it. So let's dive in and step right into the fire, beginning with Goggins' brutal childhood, a place where everything seemed stacked against him, but where the foundation of his unbreakable mindset was first forged. David Goggins' story doesn't open with medals, victories, or records. It opens with pain. He grew up in Buffalo, New York, inside a home that was more like a battlefield than a safe place. His father ruled with an iron fist, abusive, manipulative, and violent. David, his brother, and his mother lived in fear, enduring beatings that left deep scars, not just on their bodies, but on their spirits. The person who was supposed to protect him was the very person he feared the most, and that shaped his earliest understanding of the world. Outside the home, life wasn't any kinder. Poverty was a constant shadow, and racism made school another kind of war zone. He struggled with learning disabilities, stuttered when he tried to speak, and rarely felt seen except in the moments when bullies targeted him. Looking back, Goggins admits he seemed destined to be another tragic story, a kid swallowed up by trauma, poverty, and violence. By every measure, he should have become a statistic. But here's the powerful twist. He didn't stay there. At first, yes, he ran from the pain. He hid in video games, drowned himself in junk food, and escaped into daydreams of a life far removed from his own. He was overweight, insecure, and convinced that greatness belonged to other people, not him. But in the middle of all that darkness, there was a flicker, a small voice that wouldn't die out. It whispered questions that haunted him. What if you could be more? What if this isn't all there is? What if you stopped accepting this version of life? That whisper became the seed of his transformation. This part of the book drives home a hard truth. The world doesn't care about your excuses, and no one is coming to save you. Life doesn't hand out strength like a gift. You have to build it, brick by brick, through struggle. For Goggins, that process began the day he stopped looking outward for answers and turned to face himself in the mirror. And that's where his first great tool comes in, the accountability mirror. It was raw, uncomfortable, and brutally honest, but it became the starting point of his journey from a broken boy to a man who would learn how to weaponize pain into power. By the time Goggins hit his late teens, he had reached the edge of collapse. He was overweight, depressed, and drifting through life without direction. Each morning he avoided the mirror because the reflection staring back at him felt unbearable. But one day, something inside him snapped. Instead of running from that reflection, he forced himself to confront it. That moment changed everything. He stood in front of the mirror and decided there would be no more lies, no more sugarcoating, no more excuses. He named it the accountability mirror. On scraps of paper, he wrote down the harshest truths he had been avoiding. You're fat, you're lazy, you're lying to yourself. Then, right next to those brutal words, he wrote down goals that matched them. Lose weight, study harder, train harder, be better. It wasn't about tearing himself apart. It was about stripping away denial until only the truth remained. For Goggins, transformation didn't begin with some rush of motivation or a feel-good mantra. It began with honesty. He realized that until you're willing to look yourself in the eye and admit exactly who you are, you'll never have a chance at becoming who you want to be. And this is where most people stumble. They hide from their own reflection. They protect themselves with soft lies. I'll start tomorrow. I've had a hard life. I deserve a break. But those lies don't protect you. They bury your potential. Goggins decided he would never bury his again. That mirror became his battlefield. Each insult became fuel, each weakness a challenge to conquer. He wasn't chasing comfort anymore. He was chasing growth. And slowly, painfully, it worked. The weight began to come off. The workouts got harder. His mental toughness thickened like calluses, preparing him for challenges he couldn't yet imagine. The message here is raw, but unforgettable. If you want to change your life, stop negotiating with yourself. Don't soften the truth. Face it head on. Write down exactly what needs to change, and let that sting push you forward. Because that sting is where real growth begins. And for Goggins, growth came in a way that almost sounds impossible. His next step wasn't about small wins. It was about doing the unthinkable. He set out to lose more than 100 pounds in just a few months, all so he could earn his shot at Navy SEAL training. That's where the story takes a turn into one of the most extreme transformations you'll ever hear. One night, while dragging himself through another shift as a pest control worker, overweight, unhappy, and running on fumes, Goggins stumbled upon a Navy SEAL documentary playing on TV. What he saw hit him like lightning. Their grit, their toughness, the way they embraced pain instead of running from it, and the brotherhood forged through suffering. It was raw, intense, and almost inhuman. And yet, something deep inside him whispered, "That's what I want. That's who I need to be." But reality came crashing in. He was nearly 300 pounds. When he walked into a recruiter's office, he was told flat out, "You'll never make it." Not like this. Lose over 100 pounds in 3 months, or don't bother coming back. For most people, that would have been the end of the story. They would have laughed, shrugged it off, or walked away defeated. But for Goggins, it was the spark he had been waiting for. He went home, stood in front of the accountability mirror, and told himself, "I will do whatever it takes." And then he proved it. He built himself into a one-man boot camp. His days became a cycle of punishing discipline. Early morning swims to build endurance, miles of running on legs that begged him to stop, long bike rides to torch fat, and a diet so strict that every comfort food he once clung to was gone. He didn't ask his body for permission. He commanded it. Pain became his shadow, his constant companion. His body screamed for relief. His mind begged him to quit, but he didn't. Day after day, he carved himself into something new. In just 3 months, he dropped more than 100 pounds. Think about that. A man who once numbed his stress with milkshakes and fast food transformed into a machine of discipline and sheer willpower. He didn't wait for motivation to show up at his door. He built momentum through suffering. And this is where Goggins first talks about callousing the mind. Just as hard labor builds calluses on your hands, pushing yourself past every limit builds armor in your mind. Each struggle, each refusal to quit, layered toughness over weakness until the old version of him was gone. When he walked back into that recruiter's office, he wasn't the same man who had been laughed at months earlier. He was leaner, harder, sharper, and ready to step into the furnace of Navy SEAL training, a crucible designed to break even the strongest. Most men who enter never make it through. But Goggins wasn't going in to survive it. He was going in to dominate it. And that's where he introduces one of his most powerful philosophies, something he calls taking souls, a mindset that turned suffering into a weapon and gave him the edge when everyone else was ready to quit. When Goggins showed up at Navy SEAL training, what's famously called Hell Week, he knew the odds weren't in his favor. Hell Week is pure chaos, days that blur into nights with barely any sleep, endless push-ups, freezing swims in the ocean, punishing runs, and instructors whose only job is to break you down. The entire design of SEAL training is simple. find your breaking point, and push you past it until you quit. Most do. That's why the dropout rate is so high. But Goggins wasn't there to play by the usual script. Instead of letting pain crush him, he decided to flip it. He created a mindset he called taking souls. The idea was brutally simple. When people expect you to crumble, you rise higher. When they are convinced you're finished, you go harder. You take the doubt, the judgment, the low expectations, and shove it right back in their face with performance they never saw coming. One night, in the freezing dark, the instructors had the class doing log PT, hauling massive logs over their heads, soaked in icy water, bodies trembling and close to collapse. Most men were breaking down. Goggins, on the other hand, started smiling. He made it look like he was enjoying the misery, like the cold and exhaustion were feeding him. And it rattled the instructors. The very men trying to destroy his willpower suddenly looked like their own energy was being drained. He had turned the tables. He was taking their souls. But this wasn't about arrogance or showing off. It was about fuel. In the moments meant to drain him, Goggins found power. Every doubt became energy. Every setback became ammunition. Every time someone underestimated him, it lit a fire. If you think I'm finished, watch me prove you wrong. And here's the part that hits home. It's not just about Navy SEAL training. This mindset applies everywhere. In the gym, when your muscles are burning. At work, when you're under pressure. In life, when people doubt you or when circumstances seem impossible. That's your moment to take souls. By going beyond, by outlasting, by outperforming, you don't just silence the doubters, you prove to yourself that your limits were illusions all along. Taking souls became one of Goggins' most powerful weapons. It turned suffering into strength and helped him forge what he calls an armored mind. A mind so conditioned and tough that even when the body screamed to quit, he kept moving forward. For most of us, pain is something to run from. We numb it with distractions, avoid it when we can, and tell ourselves that comfort is the goal. But for David Goggins, pain wasn't the enemy, it was the forge. Every drop of suffering became fire and steel, shaping him into someone stronger, harder, and unbreakable. He calls this process building an armored mind. Think of it like lifting weights. When you push your muscles past their comfort zone, tiny tears form, and when they heal, they come back stronger. The mind works the exact same way. Each time you lean into discomfort, whether it's forcing yourself through a long run, diving into an icy swim, or grinding through study when your body begs for rest, you're creating mental calluses. Over time, those calluses stack up until they become armor, and that armor protects you when life tries to break you. Goggins proved this through experience, not theory. He went through Hell Week 3 times, each one a gauntlet designed to destroy even the toughest men. He ran ultramarathons where his feet bled through his shoes. He crushed workouts that left him coughing, cramping, and barely able to stand. And every single time, he came out sharper, harder, more relentless. These trials weren't just physical, they were training sessions for his mind, conditioning it to stop flinching when hardship showed up. Here's the truth he shares. You can't build an armored mind in comfort. You can only build it in the fire of doing things you don't want to do. That's what he calls callousing the mind. Every hard choice, every time you push past resistance, you're laying down another layer of armor. And here's where it gets real. Goggins believes that most people live at just 40% of their potential. When you feel like you're done, when your body is screaming, stop, you've still got another 60% in the tank. But without an armored mind, you never tap into it. Goggins trained himself to crash through that wall, again and again, until pushing into the pain was no longer the exception. It was the habit. The takeaway couldn't be clearer. Stop running from discomfort. Stop treating pain like a threat. Seek it, use it, and let it toughen you. Because every ounce of suffering you choose today becomes the armor you'll wear tomorrow. And once that armor is built, something shifts inside you. You stop caring about medals, applause, or outside validation. Life stops being about trophies on a shelf and starts being about testing your own edges, about mastery instead of praise. And that's where Goggins takes us next. Discovering that true fulfillment isn't found in the spotlight. It's found in pushing beyond what you thought was possible. Most of us spend our lives chasing rewards. We want the medal, the promotion, the applause, the recognition that tells us we've made it. But Goggins discovered something brutal along the way. If the only thing pushing you forward is a trophy, you won't last. Because there will always come a moment when the trophy isn't worth the pain, when applause can't drown out the suffering. And in that moment, you'll quit. He proved this lesson the hard way. Goggins signed up for his first ultramarathon, a 100-mile race, with almost no preparation. From the very beginning, his body started breaking down. His feet tore apart until every step felt like walking on shards of glass. His bones ached, his muscles screamed, and eventually he was urinating blood. Any reasonable person would have stopped. But Goggins kept asking himself a question: why am I doing this? And the answer never had anything to do with medals or finish lines. It was about proving to himself that he could keep going long after his body said no. That's the shift. The point where motivation stops being external and becomes internal. As Goggins puts it, motivation is crap. Motivation comes and goes. What drives you must be deeper. For him, that deeper drive was mastery. It was about discovering the limits of his own mind, finding out what he was truly capable of, and showing others that they could do the same. When you're chasing trophies, your fire dies the second the applause fades. But when you're chasing growth, when you're obsessed with meeting the best version of yourself, there is no finish line. You keep going because the struggle itself becomes the reward. And that's the lesson of this chapter. Life's biggest wins aren't the shiny medals on your wall. They're the invisible victories, the discipline you build, the toughness you forge, and the person you become along the way. That's why Goggins insists the most powerful weapon we have isn't our body. It's our mind. A strong body can carry you for a while, but only a strong mind can carry you for life. By this point in his journey, Goggins had shattered his body more times than most people could imagine. He had bled through his shoes, run on broken bones, and pushed himself to the edge of collapse. But through it all, he realized something crucial. His body wasn't what carried him. His mind was. The human body always yells stop long before it's actually done. The mind is the true battlefield, and if you can win there, you can win anywhere. Goggins calls the mind the most powerful weapon you'll ever own. But here's the thing. It doesn't come sharp. Just like a blade, it dulls when wrapped in comfort and only sharpens under pressure. Every time you force yourself into the uncomfortable, whether it's stepping into a freezing shower, grinding through a brutal workout, or sitting down to study when you'd rather give up, you're honing that weapon. He proves this with stories that sound almost impossible. Like running a 200-mile race. His body was wrecked, blisters tearing open, stress fractures screaming with every step, kidneys on the verge of shutting down. And yet he kept moving. Not because his body was strong, but because his mind had been trained like a muscle. He had disciplined it, stripped it of excuses, and toughened it through suffering until it became unbreakable. This is where he introduces one of his most powerful tools, the cookie jar. Now, it's not filled with actual cookies. It's filled with memories. Every time you face a hard moment and get through it, whether it's crushing an exam, finishing a brutal workout, or surviving heartbreak, you store that victory in the jar. Then, when you're in the middle of a new challenge and your mind is screaming to quit, you reach in, pull out one of those past wins, and remind yourself, I've been here before. I didn't quit then. I won't quit now. That's how Goggins kept going when his body begged him to stop. He weaponized his own history. Every past victory, no matter how small, became proof that he was stronger than the moment in front of him. And the lesson couldn't be clearer. You don't need perfect genetics, you don't need luck, and you definitely don't need anyone to hand you the path. What you need is a trained mind, sharpened through pressure and discomfort, until nothing can shake it. Because once your mind is armored, there's nothing left in the world that can truly hurt you. And this brings us to one of Goggins' most radical truths. Talent doesn't matter. What matters is obsession. What matters is an insane work ethic. What matters is the refusal to quit, no matter how much it hurts. That's the mindset that separates the average from the unstoppable. David Goggins never pretends he was born special. In fact, he's the first to admit it. He wasn't gifted. He didn't grow up athletic. He wasn't the sharpest kid in the classroom. And he carried a stutter that made speaking feel like a battlefield. He failed, stumbled, and came up short more times than he could count. But somewhere in all those setbacks, he uncovered a truth that changed the trajectory of his life. Greatness doesn't require talent. What he lacked in natural ability, he replaced with obsession. While others coasted on their gifts, Goggins outworked them. He ran farther, trained harder, and stayed in the fight longer. He came to understand that the line dividing ordinary from extraordinary isn't drawn by talent. It's drawn by grit, discipline, and the willingness to do what others won't. He proved this in ultramarathons stacked with world-class athletes. These were runners backed by sponsors, have perfect genetics, and flawless preparation. They would rocket ahead in the early miles, seemingly untouchable. But as the hours dragged on, as the pain set in and the miles stacked higher, one by one, they broke. Goggins kept going. Not because he was faster, not because he was stronger, but because his mind was armored in ways theirs weren't. His only talent was the refusal to quit. This flips one of the most common excuses right on its head. We tell ourselves, I'm not smart enough, not strong enough, not lucky enough. But as Goggins makes clear, those are nothing but shields we hide behind. The real truth? You don't need talent to change your life. What you need is relentless consistency. You need discipline that doesn't care about how you feel. You need grit that outlasts every obstacle. And he captures it perfectly in one line. Greatness pulls mediocrity into the mud. Get out there and grind. But Goggins didn't stop once he'd proven himself against the odds. He wasn't satisfied with being strong, or even being elite. His obsession carried him further. He wanted to push beyond the boundaries of the best. He wanted to test himself against those who were already uncommon, and then rise above them. This became his next mission: to be uncommon amongst the uncommon. For most people, surviving Navy SEAL training is the finish line. It's proof that you've endured one of the most grueling tests of human toughness on Earth. That patch on your uniform means you've gone further than nearly anyone else ever will. But for Goggins, that wasn't enough. He didn't just want to sit among the best. He wanted to stand out even there. He calls this mindset being uncommon amongst the uncommon. It's a shift in perspective. Ordinary people compare themselves to the average. The uncommon go beyond those averages and become exceptional. But Goggins says there's still another level, the level where even the exceptional are forced to take notice. It's about holding yourself to a standard so relentless, so extreme, that you shine in every room, no matter how elite the company. He lived this principle not only by becoming a Navy SEAL, but by going further, completing Army Ranger School, graduating as enlisted honor man, and training as an Air Force tactical air controller. He didn't need to take on these challenges. He had already proven himself. But that was the point. He wanted to prove again and again that limits are illusions, and that the ceiling only exists if you accept it. And this idea isn't locked inside the military. It applies everywhere. In your career, are you just doing enough to keep pace? Or are you pushing so hard that you change the standard for everyone else? In fitness, are you satisfied with looking in shape? Or are you testing how far your body and mind can truly go? In relationships, are you coasting on convenience? Or are you showing up with so much presence and integrity that you set the bar higher? To be uncommon amongst the uncommon means refusing to coast. It means never letting your past success become a reason to stop. The lesson here cuts deep. Comfort is not the goal. Comfort is the ceiling. And if you accept it, you'll never know how much higher you could climb. Being uncommon amongst the uncommon is what transforms a strong person into a legend. But here's the thing. Pursuing greatness at that level isn't about winning all the time. In fact, Goggins says failure is one of the most essential tools in the process. Because failure doesn't weaken you if you face it head-on. It teaches, it sharpens, it fuels growth. And that's exactly where his story takes us next. Learning to stop fearing setbacks and instead turning them into the very fuel that drives you forward. Most of us treat failure like a full stop. You fail a test, lose a competition, get rejected from a job, or stumble in life, and immediately the thought creeps in. Maybe I'm not good enough. For David Goggins, failure was never the end. It was the beginning. It was his training ground. He failed more times than most people would ever admit. He failed in school, struggled through learning, failed in his first attempts at military programs, failed in races, failed in relationships, failed in life. But the difference was, he never let those failures write his final chapter. Instead, he dissected them. He treated every failure like a map, breaking it down, studying it, and using it as a blueprint for the next attempt. To him, failure wasn't proof of weakness. It was feedback for growth. The problem, he says, isn't failure, it's quitting. Quitting means the story ends right there. But failure is just a plot twist, a rough chapter, one that can make the ending even more powerful if you keep writing. He shares moments where failure nearly destroyed him, like the time he almost drowned during the SEALs' underwater combat training. Most would have walked away, but Goggins came back with more preparation, more grit, and eventually passed. Or the countless times he collapsed during ultramarathons, body screaming for relief. Instead of retiring, he laced up again, running even further the next time, showing himself that setbacks weren't walls. They were stepping stones. That's why he calls failure empowering. It tears down your illusions and shows you the raw truth of where you're weak. And once you see that truth, you have a choice. Run from it, or face it and turn it into strength. Without failure, there's no progress. Without setbacks, there's no growth. The lesson here is simple but brutal. If you want to grow, you have to be willing to look foolish, to stumble in public, to collect scars that remind you that you tried. Every misstep, every scar, every so-called loss is fuel for a stronger comeback. Stack enough of those comebacks together, and what you build is a life without regrets. And that brings us to the final, haunting challenge Goggins leaves us with. The question he says should echo in your head every single day. What if? After everything, the childhood abuse, the crushing failures, the brutal pain, and the unbelievable triumphs, David Goggins leaves us with one question that lingers long after the last page. What if? What if you actually gave everything you had? What if you stopped listening to that voice in your head that tells you you're finished at 40%? What if you pushed past comfort, past fear, past every excuse you've been carrying around for years? Goggins says most people will die without ever knowing the answer, because they settle. They choose average, hide behind excuses, or quit at the first real sign of resistance. But imagine if you didn't. Imagine if you leaned into the suffering, embraced the grind, and pushed all the way through to the other side. Who would you meet there? What version of yourself is waiting if you stop playing small? For Goggins, this isn't about medals or records. It's about legacy. He says when his time is up, he wants to meet the version of himself who lived without limits. He doesn't want to lie there wondering what he could have been. He wants to know he left nothing behind, that he gave every ounce. That's the challenge he throws at us. To stop asking why me, and start asking, what if I don't quit? What if I keep going? What if I become more than anyone ever thought possible, including me? Can't Hurt Me isn't a feel-good story. It's a mirror held up to our faces. It's Goggins screaming at us to stop wasting our potential and confront the truth. The only thing holding us back is the story we keep repeating to ourselves. The second we stop running from pain and start using it, everything changes. Because on the other side of suffering is a life that cannot be broken. At its heart, Can't Hurt Me isn't just a book. It's a battle cry. Not a battle against the outside world, but against the limits we set for ourselves. Goggins strips away every excuse and shows us the raw truth. Suffering isn't something to avoid. It's the path forward. Talent isn't what separates the great from the average. It's relentless effort, discipline, and the refusal to stop. And every excuse we cling to is nothing more than a wall, waiting for us to smash through it. If this message shook you like it did me, don't let it slip away once the video ends. Carry it with you. Put it into practice. Every single day, ask yourself, what if? Because the answer to that question could unlock the life you were meant to live. the one hiding just beyond your comfort zone. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm Bix, and this is Bix Book Summary. If you found value here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me keep bringing you powerful stories like this one. And if you want to dive into Goggins' full story, with all the raw details, the unfiltered grit, and the challenges he dares you to take on, check out the link in the description to grab your own copy of the book. I'll leave you with the truth that David Goggins stamped into the world. You can't hurt me. And if you take these lessons to heart, if you build your own armored mind and refuse to quit, maybe one day you'll be able to say the same.